Hello, welcome to my class on scrappy binding. I'm going to show you how to make some scrappy binding and I'm going to show you how to put it on. I'm Fleur and I'm from Little Desert Quilts, and I'm going to do binding on this little quilt. So here's a quilt that I did quite a little while ago. Did this as a Geeks class early on, and it's a block that I made 4 of and then did the quilting on. So it needs a binding, haven't done. So what I'm going to do is, I don't really have these fabrics anymore, so I've just got a heap of scraps that are sort of in those colourways. So I grab my blues and greens. Yeah, they look okay. So the whole basket of scraps here. Now these are strippy scraps. Where am I going to put that? Down there. These are strippy scraps. Lots and lots of long skinny pieces. Just give them a little press, but I'm going to just press as I go. I'm not going to worry about them too much. Now, strippy binding. The trick with strippy binding using these scraps is just to keep everything nice and short, because we're going to end up cutting the fabrics on the bias. But we are going to start with some strips. Now I've got some here. Doesn't matter how long they are. So these are quite short. Doesn't matter if they're not straight, as in not the same width all the way down. Doesn't matter how wide they are. And I'm going to throw in this one here. Now this is one fabric, the blue and the red. It's from a stripe. I'm just going to throw in a little bit of red just to give it a bit of a woomph. All right, now I need to move the camera so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to put down my first strip. My next strip is going to go on top of it, and then the third strip is, going to go up here as well. Now, the thing to do is to offset them a little bit. Don't join them all up with their ends together. You're going to waste too much fabric on the end. Now, the best way to do this is sort of look at the bottom strip and roughly how wide that is. It's about 1.5 inches wide. And I'm going to move this top strip roughly 1.5 inches across and then move it back a little bit. And if you think, well, I've got no idea whether this is going to work or not, this is what you do. You grab your ruler. Now you're looking for the 45-degree line. It's there. See that 45-degree line? There's one goes that way, one goes that way. I'm going to put that 45-degree line on the bottom of my bottom strip, slide it right over to this corner of the strip here, and that is where I'll be cutting. Now, remember, when you join strips together, you're going to lose 1/4 inch off each of these. So I've got about 1/2 inch wriggle room. I'm going to leave that, because I don't want to cut myself short. What I don't want to be is be cutting out here and have nothing there. I want my binding to be, I'm going to cut my binding 2.5 inches wide. So I'm going to be happy with that little bit of wriggle room. Grab your pins. You don't have to pin, but I find it's a lot easier because otherwise this will move when I take it to the machine. That's about where it was. I'd rather have, a little bit more waste. I don't want to waste too much, but I'm happier to have a little bit of waste than have a hole in my binding. Just going to pin them together. Then I would stitch that. When I've stitched it, then I'm going to grab my, where did I put it? Here it is, my finger presser to do the seam. Now let me just grab one off here. This one will do. Got bits in all sorts of stages of construction here. So this one here has 2 strips being stitched together. Simply use your finger presser to open that seam and give it a good press. And I always go for the back as well and use my finger presser. Now what you're trying to do is get this opened out fully so that when you do this, there is no fold over or anything. You want them opened out fully. I use my finger presser as I go, and before I cut, I then press it with the iron. So this one gets stitched, then it's going to get pressed. Then I would stitch this guy onto it. So let's just unfold that for a minute. That's going to go on about there, and I would stitch and press that. Now I actually have this unit already done to show you basically what it's going to look like. So there you go, same fabric, so you can see exactly what it looks like. So you can see the offset bit here. See, it steps up. Now, don't do heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps, because we're going to cut it on the bias. If you have a huge big piece, it's really hard to cut. So let's make it easy. I'm going to turn this, I'm right-handed, so I want it to go that way. My 45-degree line is up here on my ruler. I sit that on the edge of that bottom corn fabric, and I'm going to go looking at my pieces. Now this one, there's plenty of room. This one, I'm really close to the edge. Okay, I'm right on the edge, and that'll be okay. I definitely can't go any further over because I will not have this blue fabric completely in my strip. So I'm going to set my 45-degree line on the edge of my bottom fabric. Put my ruler as far this way as I can without losing that. Now, my cutter, just grab my rotary cutter, hold that ruler in place and simply cut that end off, just like that. So that is waste, wherever I'm putting that. Now I'm going to turn this guy around. So I've got my 45-degree. I now just use the straight lines on my ruler, and I'm going to do a 2.5 inch. So 1, 2, 2.5. I can use my 45-degree line again. Now my 45-degree line is on my top fabric. I'm just going to line that up. So I'm lining up my 45-degree line on the top edge, and this 2.5 inch line. No, that's 2 1/4. Oh, nearly cut it too skinny. 1, 2 1/4. So now we're 2.5. 2.5 is down that cut edge. Hold it in place, and I like to use my fingers up on the ruler. I don't put my hand flat, and my little finger, I stick it off on this side. That means that if the ruler does move, I can feel it moving, and I'll stop cutting. All right, so I'm going to trim that. That is my first little piece. Just put that aside. Now, am I going to get another bit out of here? No, I'm not on the corn fabric, but I will get a 2.5 inch strip out of these two. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Or I could put another third fabric on first. So I could cut that now, or I could put a third fabric on. This one will be unpicked and taken off, or simply, let's not even bother with the unpicking business. Let's just cut that off, okay? And then that'll come off super, super easy, just like that. No unpicking. Just cut that off because you can't use it, and then that other bit just comes off. All right, so we have that edge. Now we could cut that, or we could sew another fabric on first. So let's pop another one on. Let's just go with this little guy. So there's a little touch of red in that. Now I'm not even worried that that's been folded in half. I need to, because I've done the cuts now, I need to go there and a little bit 1/4 inch back this way, so that when I sew that seam, it will still be enough there. So see that little dog ear, how it's coming over? Because I'm going to lose 1/4 inch off both those fabrics when I sew it. So I'm just going to sew this and then come back and show you the next bit. So here we are back again with that piece stitched on, and you can see where that little bit is sticking up above the edge. So I need to turn it this way and trim the edge again, lining up my 45-degree line on one of the seams. So I can do it on a seam, I can do it on the edge. So I trim that one. That way we're not using. Turn it around, trim the other way. 2.5 inch. Make sure you're getting it at 2.5 inch. Lining up my 45-degree line on the bottom edge or top edge, whichever way you're looking at that. 2.5. It's probably not a bad idea to mark your ruler at 2.5 inch so you know where the 2.5 is. Just going to line everything up. And this is why you only want to do short pieces, because you can manipulate it and line it up. There you go. I can just get that in there. So now I have got 2 bits. I've got a whole stack more here ready to go as well. So I'm just going to show you while I talk about how we're going to do this. So 45-degree line on the edge of the fabric. Those off, turn it around. I'll probably cut a few off this one. So line up the 2.5, line up the 45-degree line. Make sure everything's straight and lined up. Oops, don't wobble the ruler. Cut your 2.5 inch. Now, if you have a stripology ruler, you can certainly use that. So this is the mini stripology. So if you had one of these, you could use this. And if you were doing that, you use the 45-degree line. Oops, hang on, that way. We want to cut that way, don't we? There we go. 45-degree line, dash, 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 is going to sit along that seam. Just need to position it so that I can cut. There we go. Line that up, and then I can cut through the 2.5 inch line. Actually, if I need to move that up, cut through the 2.5, the 5, etc. Now, if you've got the longer stripology ruler, that means you'll get more cuts out of that. And this is another reason why you want to keep it short. Okay. Now, with the stripology ruler, it is better to use the 45mm cutter. As you can see, with the 28, it doesn't actually quite go through because of the size of the blade and the fact that you're cutting through those strips. So you do need to use your 45mm cutter with a stripology ruler, and the big long one is certainly going to work a lot better than that smaller one for this job. Okay, go back to this ruler, 2.5 inches, double check, yes. Now, am I going to get another one? Probably not going to get another one with the blue, but I will get another one with the star fabric and the batik. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that. That one I'm not going to get one out of. That one, I'm just going to leave that on the end and leave that on the end of my binding, and it will get cut off when I put the binding on the quilt. So I've got a few pieces here, nice and short. So you just go through. Let's have a look at this one. So this fabric had some writing on it. I'm just going to get rid of that writing. I figured that that'll disappear when I do the cut. Yep, it does. So there's my 45 cut. That gets rid of that marking. Now there's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of texture marking on that fabric. That'll end up in seam allowance. You won't see it. Won't see it. Don't worry about it. This one is also a little bit short at that top end, so this can be the end of another one. So those two are going to be ends. Right, now this strip I can use again. I can sew that onto something else. So you just keep working through all your bits. Oops, put that up there. So you stitch and sew. Don't, like I said, don't have a great big long one and think you're going to do this with a 24-inch ruler, because what happens if you try and do that is it all moves around and stretches, and you spend all your time trying to get it lined up and straight, and it is not quicker. Believe me, it's not quicker. I've tried it. It just means that you end up spending a lot of time juggling and making them all line up. All right, so that one is going to get cut through there, and when I turn this around, we will have plenty of bits that I can cut off, because with a short ruler, and that's why I'm using the short ruler, because I'm not tempted to do the big long, just checking it's 2.5, I'm not tempted to do 24 inches at a time. Now you can see this one goes longer than this. Yep, I'm going to get one out of there, and then get one out of there. Yeah, we do, which is good. The other thing is keeping them short means that your binding gets scrappier and all more mixed up. It's not so much a regular pattern. Now I'm just going to cut through there, get rid of that one because it can get stitched onto something else. And will I get one out of here? I'll get one out of this blue and this turtle and frog fabric. That little bit can just be cut off. Alright, so we'll get that little bit, that can go onto something else, that can come off, or it can be another starter end. I'll worry about that later. So I just start, getting all my bits, keep working through them, and then eventually you will join these together. Mix them up. So I might join that one onto that one, or I might do, we'll do the one with the red on there, so we might join that on. But I don't start joining them together until I reckon I've got enough for my quilt. That way I can distribute all the colours bits all around, because this red, I don't want it all in one place. I want it to be distributed around the quilt. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more of this, and then I'll come back and show you what comes next. Okay, there's a couple of things I want to show you. I've stitched lots of bits together. Now I just want to show you this one. Not going to get this little gap filled in. Don't have to waste it. Just put my 45-degree line on the outside edge, line up my straight on one of the seams, and just cut it off to there. That bit no good. This bit still can be used. Okay, so I've got all of these bits. Now these are my spares. These are my leftovers, because what I've done is I've actually joined together enough pieces to create my 4 bindings. So there's my little quilt that I'm going to put the binding around. And I've got 4 separate pieces of binding. I want to show you a few other tricks as well. This one wasn't quite long enough. There it is there. Wasn't quite long enough. So I decided I would just whack this piece on the end. And I need to do the 45 degrees. Put the 45 degrees. Oops, wrong way. Go that way. Hang on a minute. Line it up. Okay, where's my line? 45 degrees on there. So going down that way and just trimming. And that will keep it everything back in alignment. Just got to get the... Now, I don't worry too much when I'm joining the pieces together, whether they line up perfectly. Now, you've got to remember, you're dealing with bias edges here. They do move around a little bit. So there's a tiny little bit of off. That's going to be okay, because we are going to fold that in half and press it. Don't stretch this while you're doing it. You've got to remember that they are bias edges. Now, there was another one that I needed to trim as well. This one here. I whacked another end. This was the end that was already on the strip, and it was the wrong angle, so I just whacked a bit off the other end. I'm going to do the same thing here. Just going to do a trim up. Use my 45-degree line down here. Try and line everything up as best we can. Yep, that did cut. Turn it around. When you're pressing, when you're joining the strips together, be very careful that you don't distort things. You don't want to be moving it around and making it stretch. And the other thing is, if you are trying to join your pieces together, now I didn't position that ruler very well, because I'm just going to whack that bit off at the top. Right, naughty. Okay, when you're joining bits together like this, that onto that, so this is how I do it. I sew those together. I do recommend that you pin, because they do shift around. If you don't pin, they're going to shift around on you, and it's not real easy to get them lined up, because you're trying to get a straight line down the sides. It's not going to line up perfectly, let me tell you that. Okay, so this goes over the top of this, and you have little dog ears, both sides. About a 1/4 inch dog ear on that side, 1/4 inch dog ear on that side. That's where it should line up. Don't line it up with the points touching the point, you know, the very point touching the point. It won't line up when you flip it. It'll be out like that. You'll have this big dog leg in it. That's not going to work well. So you've got to make sure you've got your dog ears hanging out, both sides. Now, if you find this doesn't line up, and I had one that did that, that didn't line up. One was way longer than the other, and I'm thinking, what's going on? Then I checked the angle with the ruler, and I ended up trimming off that much. That's how much it had either stretched or wasn't cut properly in the first place. So I cut that back, and see it was way, way longer on its original line, and I cut it back at the right angle, and then it fitted properly. So you just simply put those together with the little dog ears each end, and put my pins in at an angle, and then I can take that to, oops, get in there, line up, take that to the machine and stitch it. So there's just a few little tips that will help you to get these bits of binding. Now let's have a bit of a clear space here. So there's your quilt, and I managed to keep the red bits. Now you put, what I've done is I've made 4 strips, 1 for each side of the quilt, with the red roughly in the middle, but not exactly. And you'll notice that there is also overhang. It needs to be longer. So it needs to be a bit longer. I'm not sure which way. It doesn't really matter which way it goes, because the red is sort of in the middle, but not exactly. Now, I could place it precisely. That one seems to be the longest strip. There's plenty on that one. Now, I'm not going to, you can't quite see that corner, but I've got 2 fabrics that are the same up there, so I'm going to turn that strip around the other way. That's quite simple. They're not the same, they're not the same, they're not the same. All right, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to put this on. So to prepare this, I'm going to take this to the ironing board, press it in half, and then I'm going to stitch my binding onto the quilt, leaving tails at both ends. Now again, don't stretch it, it is bias. So once I've pressed this, perhaps I'll press that and come back and show you what happens next. I'm going to press them first. Okay, so I've pressed the 4 binding strips. Now we're going to mark the quilt in the corners exactly 1/4 inch from each corner. And there's a few ways you can do that. My little A template piece from my Carver block set has lines, 1/4 inch lines. I don't know whether you can see those, and a little dot there. So if you place that on the corner, the little dot place it in the corner like that, and then you just mark through that little dot. So with the marking tool of your choice, just mark through that, and that will be the exact 1/4 inch from each side. So that is one way to do it. You could also use a ruler to do this. You could also use a purple fang. So if you've got a purple fang, this has a 1/4 inch square on this end of it. So you do exactly the same thing. Place that purple fang right on the corner with 2 sides on the edge of the quilt and just mark the dot there. So go ahead and do that on all 4 corners, because what we're going to do is we're going to stitch on the binding from that dot to that dot. So we are leaving that tiny 1/4 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and do all 4 corners and put these 4 bindings on. I'm going to stitch each binding on from dot to dot, leaving the corners open, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to do the corners. Okay, I've stitched the first 2 on, and before I stitch the other 2 on, I fold the first 2 back and I look and I check that I have got everything caught where it's supposed to be, and that I haven't missed anything, and there's nothing showing that shouldn't be. Now, I don't know whether you can see this, but you can see, hopefully, that I have stopped. Now, you need to do a locking stitch. So with my machine, when I pin, and I'll show you what I'm doing. Oops, I don't know which is the front, which side was which. Does it matter? No, I don't think it matters. All right, so I want that red there to line up with my center seam. So I'm just going to turn it this way because I find it easier to work this way. Remembering there is a 1/4 inch seam. So when I put that on here, I need to offset it by 1/4 inch. And what I'm going to do is poke my pin through where I think that seam should be, and eyeball about 1/4 inch. Then I'm going to have a sneak look. No, I need to move that over a tiny bit. Not very scientific, just trial and error. Yep, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to pin that in place right there, and that will hopefully create that red right in the center. Let me have a look at these ones. There you go, look at that. There's that red line coming into the center. Oh, that one's overshot it. I'm not going to worry about that. I did try and line it up, but I've overshot that one. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm trying to line them up, but I'm certainly not going to unpick that and redo it. Not that stressed. I was just practicing the skill. So that pin is in there. Now I'm going to pin this back out of the way, just to hold it out of the way. So I don't want it in the way of me pinning the next one. I can still see that dot, and I'm, without stretching, going to lay this out and roll it back. Put a little crease in it so that it lines up with that dot. Then fold it back flat. I can see that crease. I should be through the crease and through the dot. Yes, okay. I'm going to put a straight pin in there. Make sure this other one is well out of the way, because you do not want to stitch into that. So straight pin. Do the same at the other end. Fold that onto that dot. You can see I've got a white dot on this corner because this is a dark corner, so I use the white pen or white pencil. Put that through that crease, through that dot. Yes, now that can be held back out of the way. Just pin that straight. Now once I've got those 3 straight pins in, then I'm going to do my angled pinning that I usually do. I leave the straight ones at the end because that reminds me that I've got to do a stop and a start. I put in several pins. I'm going to change this center pin by putting one right beside it, take it out, and then put that in at the angle as well. Easy to get out, and also means I can get all the way to the seam joins when I am stitching. So I'm going to go ahead, pin the other end exactly the same as this, sew them, and then come back and show you how to deal with the corners. Okay, here's what you do with the corners. You've stitched to the dot on that side, you've stitched to the dot on that side, and these should be coming to the same point. Now what we're going to do is fold the folded edge up to the seam line, not all the way to the edge, just to the seam line. Now I know this may be difficult to see. Give that a good finger press. Use your finger presser if you want to. You just want a nice crease in there so you can see it. If you can't see it very well, draw it in. So I'm just going to draw it in so that you can see that line, hopefully, with my marker. Then using the angle finder tool, now this is from Creative Grids and it has 135 degrees, 90 degrees, 60 degrees and 120 degrees. We're just going to use the 90 degree one because this is a 90 degree corner. There is a dashed line down the middle. That goes on the fold you just made. You line up the edge of the tool with that little dot of stitching and then you just draw in that corner. Make it nice and dark so you can see it. You're probably not going to be able to see this. Anyway, I just draw in that corner. I'm trying to make it dark so you can see it. Let me bring that up closer. See that? Can you? I don't know whether you can see that. Alright, then you pin it. Where's my pins? So those two tails, we're going to pin them together. Just line them up and pin them. Like a pin in here. Doesn't really matter as long as it's away from that line. And then grab your quilt. Push. So what you're putting together is the binding only and all the quilt is out of the way. Just manipulate that so that I'll put a pin back here. Now what you're going to do is take this to the machine and stitch that corner that you just marked. Now you're only stitching through the binding, you are not stitching through the quilt. So you have to take this to the machine, put that under the machine so that your needle goes right in at that dot, which is where you stop stitching, and it should line up with the dot on the other side where you stop stitching. You do a locking stitch. Now I just hold my machine and don't let it move forward. Do about 3 or 4 stitches. Then you stitch down this line. Again, I do a locking stitch by holding the machine and I make it do about 3 stitches right in that corner. Then I have stop needle down, pivot, I stitch off just off the edge and then I reverse back and I reverse back and cut it off. That's what we do. So we do that stitching. Now, I've done the other corners so I can show you. So then it looks like this. And I have already trimmed it. Grab your scissors, grab your scissors and trim, and I always do a little bit of a cut across the top to get rid of some bulk. I'm going to get rid of a little bit more bulk. Yes, I've got my curved scissors because just right now I can't find my straight ones. Anyway, they're here somewhere. So just trim that off. Don't cut the stitching, but trim that off. Then get a tool of choice. Sometimes the end of the finger presser will work. My preferred tool is the little curved awl, a little hook on the end, smooth side of that. I just get in there, on this side, put it right up to the point and turn it through and just manipulate out. I'll show you one I've done earlier. So here we go. There's the corner. There's another one. That one actually, the corner fell where there was a seam, so there's a bit of bulk in that one. But here you are. There's your corner, stitched on the front, stitched on the back. Then all you have to do is turn this over, pin it. I like to turn it over and pin. I'm a great pinner. You could also use clips along here. I tend to pin this down and then I'm going to hand stitch it down. If you prefer to machine stitch, you can certainly do that. This technique will also work if you sew it on the back first and then turn it over to the front and machine sew it down. But what you get with this technique using this angle finder tool, the angle finder, that's what it's called, the angle finder by Creative Grids. By using this tool, you're going to get beautiful corners. Now, I've got some to show you. I'm just going to show you a few. We're nearly out of time, so I'll be really quick. So here's some I did earlier. All of these have perfect mitered corners stitched back and front. And you can see this one has got a bit of a scrappy binding, but they were wide pieces. This one here, because you are putting on the 4 pieces, you can control where it goes. So this binding, I've actually done machine embroidery in it with words, and I've positioned it so that it's all the right way up and everything around the binding. This one here, look what I've done. I've changed the binding colour right where the colour changes on the quilt, and I can line that up perfectly because I'm pinning those centres and then joining my corners. This one here is a slightly different technique, but it's created a frame. There's still got the back and front, but this is a flat binding rather than filled with wadding. This one here is another one that has those nice neat corners. This one here I managed to cut the fabric differently, so the fabric in the binding is all up the same way. Some of it is cut one way and some of it is cut the other way. So different things that you can control by controlling your binding and putting it really neatly in the corners. Now I'm out of time, so thank you very much for joining me today. Any questions, just come and see me at Little Does It Quilts. Thanks for joining me. Bye.